Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College Football Playbook Podcast. I'm Mark Givler, joined by Tyler Shoemaker, as always. It's going to be a college football playoff reaction show today. Big semifinal action. That was great. I mean, I know there's probably some fan bases that didn't think it was so great, which we'll get into in a moment. But two amazing games. I had a feeling these were going to be competitive. I kind of, put on Twitter, hot take incoming. Both semis are actually going to be competitive. I think a lot of people were skeptical of that just because of the history of the semifinals, where we've generally maybe had one competitive game and one blowout. Some years it's been two blowouts. And, it just felt right this year, even though a lot of people were actually predicting blowouts in both games. I don't know. I like the matchups for the underdogs. And sure enough, two great games. Tyler, let's get right into it. Big takeaways from the weekend. I don't know if you want to start with Michigan TCU maybe first, and we can kind of build off of that. I guess, how surprised were you that TCU pulled off the upset?
Pretty surprised, honestly. I mean, we talked, and I said my number on the game was Michigan minus 10.5. There was a lot of sharp action on TCU early in the week, and that proved to be, the right way to go. I think if you're a casual college football fan, or obviously if you're a TCU fan, I think that outcome was great to kind of get a new face into the national championship. And it's not just Alabama and Georgia and Clemson and Ohio State. So I think from that standpoint for the sport, I think it was really good. As a numbers guy, someone that tries to do predictive models, I mean, that game was very shocking. But I mean, you look at 2 pick sixes for JJ McCarthy. I mean, that kind of explains it right there. They lost by 6. They go up 14 points. That swing doesn't happen, and that's Michigan by 8. So from a predictive standpoint, like I kind of stand by my numbers. But I mean, again, that's why they play it on the field and not on paper. And Michigan just made some costly mistakes when Donovan Edwards ran 50 yards on that first play. I was like, oh boy, this is not going to be good. And then they didn't have another one of those that I can recall. So, Michigan, McCarthy was kind of sloppy with the ball, and it really cost him. And credit TCU. I mean, they capitalized on those, and they hit big plays of their own. That thing, it was the third quarter where it was just back and forth for like 4 straight possessions. That was awesome. That was so fun to watch.
Yeah, that was it was a great game. I'm not surprised TCU covered. I kind of predicted they would. I am surprised at a couple things in that game, specifically Michigan turning the football over. One, they've kind of played that ball control. Let's let the opponent make the big mistake, and that's kind of how they've navigated their season. And so to make 2 huge mistakes was surprising. I was surprised they seemed to get down inside the 10, and then Donovan Edwards would come out of the game, and I'm just like, man, you don't have quorum. And we've seen all year how the drop off from Michigan's top 2 to the rest of their running backs has been significant.
Yeah.
I think they wasted some opportunities there. Obviously, when he rips off, the 50-plus yarder, okay, maybe you're going to get him a breather or something, get him out for a play or two. But there were other instances where they were getting down in there and they would pull him out of the game. And I think that was a game you needed to continue to hammer him. But, elephant in the room, the replay officials in that game, they overturn a long touchdown, which ends up costing Michigan very dearly. We'll start with that call. What was your thought on that? As far as, were you surprised they overturned it? Should it have been overturned?
I was surprised. I thought it was a touchdown. So I definitely sympathize with Michigan fans there that may be upset. And going back to 2016, Michigan fans are kind of scarred from officiating in big games anyway. With the JT spot. So this is just one more for them to kind of rue the day. But yeah, I was surprised. I thought it was a touchdown, and I mean, I absolutely hate. I tweeted earlier this week that I unfollowed several people after the other semifinal for blaming refs, and like I teach my kids not to do that. I don't blame refs, but man, when you lose by 6 and you had that touchdown taken away from you, that really sucks. I definitely feel for them in that regard.
This will be a theme. Both of these points will kind of be a theme for me in this episode. One, I'm stunned they overturned it. If you call them down on the field, I think it would have been hard to give them the touchdown on review. I think whatever you called on the field there was going to be really tough to overturn. And I think we saw replay officials over the weekend, and this will be a theme. I think we saw replay officials kind of overstep their bounds a little bit this weekend. They are supposed to only overturn calls if there is like clear and conclusive evidence. I certainly didn't see it here. Yes, his butt hit the ground at like the half-yard line. He didn't initially have control of the football. He bobbled the ball. There was a clear juggle until by the time he actually had control of the football, I thought he was in the end zone. But either way, I don't know how you overturn that. I just thought that was way too close for a replay official to get involved in overturning it.
Yeah.
But then I turn around and it's like, okay, what are you doing here? Now, like, how do you not get? You still are first and goal with a foot from the goal line, like
with the best offensive line in the country. I don't
how do you botch that? And then again, where's Donovan Edwards?
Yep.
So that's that. Then at the end, obviously, the targeting, the non-targeting, I guess it was reviewed for targeting. It was not called targeting on the field. Was reviewed. What were you thinking at that point? Because that would have been an interesting kind of point in the game there. I mean, I don't know that. I think you're really implying a lot by saying that cost Michigan the game. I mean, there was a lot left there for Michigan to do in a very short amount of time, even if that's called targeting. But just kind of your thoughts on that whole sequence.
Yeah, I mean, that was one I thought maybe could go either way, but I understand at that point in the game not wanting, the officials not wanting to drastically, potentially change the outcome of that game with that particular call. So I didn't really have a problem with them not calling it just because of the situation. But had they called it, I wouldn't have had a problem with that either.
Yeah, it felt to me, I mean, it would have been a huge bailout call. I mean, it would have been like, the equivalent almost of, some contact on a half court buzzer beater attempt where a guy maybe gets bumped and, you call the foul and give him 3 shots. And it's like, oh, you really want to do that there. But yet, in a vacuum, is that targeting? I think it is.
Yeah.
There was forcible contact to the, head, shoulders area with crown of the helmet. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't like the idea of the call there because it would have been such a bailout call.
Yep.
But it's like, it's the rule, man. So that's
which I don't know that anyone understands what the rule actually is or how it should be enforced, as we'll get into in a minute, I'm sure. But like the inconsistency, I think, is the biggest issue here with the targeting call, just from one game to the next, from one officiating crew to the next. It's funny because you see a play like that happen and then you get on Twitter and you'll have 10 people saying like, oh, definitely targeting. And then you have 10 other people saying there's no way that's targeting. And it's like, nobody knows what targeting is.
Yeah. I think, we saw some gross misinterpretations of the rules, I think, not only by fans on Twitter over the weekend, but probably by replay officials themselves. It was way more high scoring than I thought. And it's not that I didn't think the offenses would move the ball. I thought the offenses would move the ball, but I thought it would happen in a manner, especially for Michigan, where there would be some level of efficiency offensively to the point where Michigan's putting together, 5, 6, 7 minute drives, and maybe TCU's doing something similar because Michigan's been pretty good at avoiding explosive plays against them. So I thought this would maybe more of the methodical drives and resulting in something, where maybe you get to 30 and you can win the game. But obviously we saw explosives left and right, and you kind of called it at the beginning. You said, TCU's kind of lived and died by explosives this year, and that was obviously a very good reason to pick Michigan, would be that, Michigan would limit some of those and kind of play some keep away. They did not. Man, so many explosive plays in that game. It was almost ironic, given how Michigan beat Ohio State a few weeks ago, to kind of have the tables turn.
Yeah, I think Ohio State fans had to be watching that game like, where was this defense in November? Because TCU, they were just rattling off long touchdown after long touchdown. It was unbelievable. It was kind of like what I think a lot of people thought the Ohio State Michigan game might look like, but Michigan, especially in the second half, just kind of suffocated Ohio State, and then TCU just went crazy.
Yep. So, hey, it's one of those games where some bounces go against Michigan, a couple calls go against Michigan, and they're going to be playing the what if game. They're not going to be the only Big Ten team playing the what if game. Georgia, Ohio State. Oh my goodness! If you're an Ohio State fan, if you're someone who covers the Buckeyes, you had major 2019 Clemson vibes in this game, where 6 or 7 kind of ridiculous things happened. And if only one fewer ridiculous thing had happened than the 6 or 7 that happened, if 5 ridiculous things happened instead of 6, they win this game. And that was Clemson a couple of years ago, and it was Georgia again on Saturday night. I picked Georgia to win the game. I thought it would be close. I thought Ohio State had a really good chance to cover. I think you did as well. I think we were both on the same page. I think we both picked Georgia by like a field goal type of game, and that's kind of how it played out. Now, how it got there, I don't know that we expected that. No. Ohio State led for
majority
of the game, like 50, or I wouldn't say led. They only trailed for I think it was 3 minutes in the game. I think they trailed for 50 some seconds in the first half before
halftime. Yep.
And then they trailed obviously there at the very end, the last minute or so. So it might have been 58 minutes where they were either tied or winning this game.
Yep.
Before we get into the details, gosh, what were your thoughts on Saturday night? Before we get into it was a great game, right?
Yep.
We're going to nitpick some of this stuff, but ultimately, what a great game between two of the best programs in the country.
Yeah, definitely. I had tweeted after the Michigan game, they're like, my God, if the Peach Bowl is anywhere near that exciting, I'm going to need blood pressure medicine, because I don't know that I can handle it. And then sure enough, it was even more intense than the Michigan game. It was a classic. Obviously, I'm sure Georgia fans are excited about that. Ohio State fans are devastated at the ending, but what a great game. Especially, with some legacy stuff kind of on the line. I even just as a casual fan, I think you have to feel good for CJ Stroud at the way he put together his best collegiate performance in the biggest game. And, with all the injuries Ohio State had down the stretch, he was just willing that team, putting them on his back on that final drive to try to get it done, and just came up just one point short.
Yeah. And, it's one of those weird games. Everyone overreacts to these big bowl games or these playoff games, defining the hierarchy of college football by one 60-minute game in January. But this was kind of one of those rare games where I think both programs come out with a better public perception maybe than they even went into the game with. I think it would have been very hard for me really to draw up scenarios where Ohio State, people are kind of down on them, especially their fans are kind of down on how, the Michigan game went and everything else. I think Ohio State comes out of this with probably enhanced public perception, which is kind of unusual for a loss in these types of situations. But Like, where do we start with kind of where this went wrong for Ohio State? I guess we have to kind of address the elephant in the room, which was the Marvin Harrison play. Again, was it targeting? Was it not targeting? Just kind of, again, same thing with the Michigan overturn. Are you surprised that they overturned it?
I was. I thought for sure, like as that was happening, I was like, okay, this is going to be bad because I mean, you assume it was a concussion when Marvin Harrison's laying on the ground. You assume it's concussion related, so you have to assume he's probably not coming back in the game. So I'm thinking of it from the Ohio State standpoint, like, okay, where does this leave them? And it's like, well, at least they're going to have the ball first and goal from the 2 and can maybe get a touchdown here to create some separation, and maybe that'll be enough to get the win. But when they lost Marvin Harrison and also didn't get the first and goal, I mean, that was a major turning point in that game.
Yeah, I'm gonna like Harrison's absence was obviously huge, and it's not just talking about targeting and officials and stuff like that. If you watch the game, from as we did, they had no answer. Georgia had no answer for Marvin Harrison for the first 25 minutes or whatever of that game, and their answer to him was to double him and bracket him and do all these things. And what that resulted in was Emeka Ibuka going nuts from the midpoint of the second quarter until the end of the third quarter. So like Harrison, like 5 for like 121, something like that in the first 25 minutes of the game. And then Ibuka had was he like 6 for 100 or something like that? I mean, he started taking over because they were working so hard to defend Harrison. Well, when Harrison goes out of the game, that last third down play before Ohio State attempted the game-winning the would-be game-winning field goal, they had bracketed Ibuka and they took away the slant there, and they would have, that could not have been possible with Marvin Harrison on the field. So just his absence was big. Again, I'll say the same thing I said about the Michigan touchdown that was overturned. I don't know how you overturn that in that situation. That's such a difficult overturn to make. And, I go back to clear evidence. Was there clear evidence that was clearly not targeting? I don't think so. It's really strange to me, even more so than like the overturns that kind of go against what the replay official is supposed to actually be looking for to do, is we have almost overnight 180'd, it felt like, from everything is targeting. Like everything is targeting. Like I'm on Twitter every Saturday just complaining about, some game, Vanderbilt, Missouri or something are playing, and I see some ridiculous target. Like it's just every weekend there's something to, we're just not going to call targeting, apparently, like last over the weekend, because there were some pretty egregious fouls there. But I will say all that to say, because I don't want this to come off as ref blaming. Ohio State is up 14 points going into the fourth quarter. They get a field goal in the fourth quarter. So you have given your defense essentially a 17-point margin for error in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
If you hold them to 17, you go to overtime. If you hold them to 16 or less, you win the game. That to me is the biggest. And I do get the Harrison thing. I get that was such a big loss for them, not just for maybe taking some points off the board, but just for the entire way that game was going and how they had to run their offense in the fourth quarter. But my goodness, like a 17, you're in the college football semifinals, so you're supposed to be pretty decent on defense if you get to that point of the season. And your defense kind of fell apart against Michigan. And not kind of, it did. And now, again, you have a 17-point margin for error in the fourth quarter, and you don't get a stop. Not only do you not get a stop, you're up 2 scores with 7-8 minutes to go, and you give up a 1-play, 76-yard touchdown drive. Like, if you give up a 5-minute touchdown drive in that situation, you win.
That's exactly the point that I was going to make. It's like, I don't know why you're not just playing as safely as you possibly can, because even if you make them march and they still score a touchdown, you at least made them march. Time is on your side in that point. The only thing you can't do is give up a quick touchdown, and that's exactly what they did. And they just, for the second game in a row, just kind of killed themselves with unnecessary aggression on defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I ripped them. I ripped Jim Knowles and the defensive philosophy from the Michigan game. And, for most of the game, it was better. They actually played a really good third quarter defensively. They played a lot of zone, though. They played a lot of zone in the third quarter, and we're making, Bennett kind of pick apart the zone. And then they're in cover one on that long touchdown pass, and you give a 76-yard touchdown pass, you're in cover one, and everyone's like, well, the safety, or Lathan Ransom slipped. He's the safety. And I'm like, that's fine. Why is there no safety help?
Right.
And it's like, well, there's the cover one safety. I'm like, this is like almost a basketball term, but it's football too. Know your personnel. You don't have an elite you don't have a Malik Hooker back there.
Nope.
They're not, whoever I don't know who on the roster they thought was going to get over the top in that situation. They weren't going to do it. I mean, you got the fastest guy on the field lined up across from Lathan Ransom. And it looked like Lathan, even, this is, people aren't going to like this probably, but it looked to me like he was about to get run past anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it would have been that wide open, obviously, if he fell down. So it was like extra wide, but like, it looked like he fell because he had an oh crap moment. Like, going vertical here. I better turn and run. And fell. It looked like he was about to get run by anyway.
Yeah. But, I mean, to use your like basketball analogy, like it's like he was about to get crossed over and fell down, but even had he not, he still was not in position to make the play. Like I agree with you that I think that play was going to get made either way. I think he just realized, man, I'm cooked, and tried too hard to scramble and just lost his footing. So like, yes, he fell down, but I agree that I think even had he not fallen down, I think that's still the same result.
So I don't know why you're in that defense at that point. Again, it feels like they outthought themselves. Like, we just had all the success in the third quarter with zone. We're going to switch it up. They're going to be coming out here for this series. They're going to be expecting zone. We're going to hit them with some cover one man. We're going to bring some pressure. We're going to just, it's the chess match or whatever. We're going to totally, and I'm just like, man, you
don't have to play
8
chess
minutes away from going to the national championship game and being, probably would have been like a 10-point favorite in the national. Like you're 8 minutes away from very likely being a national champion. And all you had to do is not give up a one-play drive. Like if you give up a 4 or 5 minute touchdown drive there, you probably still win the game.
Yep.
So I don't just buy this. You can't talk about this game and not mention the Marvin Harrison thing. That's obviously a key component to this game, but you also can't just put it all on that. You have to, at some point, you have to play a little bit of defense. I mean, that was get even a 2-point conversion stop. If you get a 2-point conversion stop, that the game might be different. I mean, you lost by a point. Yep. So you never know. I mean, there were so many opportunities for Ohio State defensively to withstand the loss of Marvin Harrison Jr. that I refuse to just put this solely on Marvin Harrison Jr. situation. I just think that's unfair. And you do have to credit Georgia. Like, look, they're despite my issues with the Lathan Ransom play and the call there and everything else, Stetson made some really good throws down the stretch.
And they had it schemed up well too. I mean, they did a very good job.
Yeah, the go-ahead touchdown was a great throw to the corner of the end zone. They had the one down the seam. God, who was back? I don't know if it was Hickman. They threw it over. They threw it. He dropped it right in between two safeties, and so there were some really big. And that's the heart of the champion. And it's quite frankly, it's the reason I picked Georgia to win a close game, is because I've seen Georgia make those winning plays, and I've seen Ohio State allow those type of winning plays against them in big games. And it kind of, it didn't play out for 60 minutes the way I thought it would. I didn't think Ohio State would be in such control of the game for such a long stretch, but it ultimately came down to what I thought it would come down to. And we talked about it, and that's kind of what happened.
Yep. And I just want to say this in closing. I blame this game. Like, I blame the Ohio State loss 0% on Noah Ruggles. Like, you put him in a position to kick a 50-yard field goal, and he's never made a 50-yard field goal in the game. So like I don't blame him one single bit. I don't understand like I get that like that was the last play and like that could have won it, but he was put in a impossible situation there. I mean, if he makes it, great, but you've never seen him do it in a game. Why would you think he was going to make it then? I mean, you had to kick it because I mean you can't go for it at that point. But as far as like the fans and stuff go, like I blame him 0% for that loss.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Look, he was 0 for 4 in his career from 50 plus before that one. And, there's people out there, well, he just made from 48. Yeah, he did. And I don't know if people didn't watch the kick, but that thing, like, barely freaking cleared the crossbar. Yep. He was at the clear, like, limit of his range. And I made the golf analogy. If I hit my driver 260 yards and I step up to the tee box and you tell me it's 265 to clear the water off this tee box, not only am I hitting it in the water in that situation, I'm probably not hitting it straight because of how hard I'm going to have to swing to try to clear the water. Like,
yep.
The odds of him making that were so remotely low. I saw someone tried to throw out a stat like, 50 plus yard kicks by college kickers are, 55%. Like, it wasn't anywhere close to 55% chance of making that kick. No, not even close. I mean, I would put it 10, 15% chance of making that kick.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, he's never made a 50-yard kick. And we just watched him barely clear the crossbar from 48. And now it's the ultimate pressure. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't put that on him at all.
So, yeah, heartbreaking loss for Ohio State. Another big win for Georgia, who will now go into the national championship game. Opened up as a 13.5-point favorite. I think as the time of recording this, I think we're seeing 12.5. I think is the number we're seeing most often. I'll let you kind of carry this one. Where do you have this game? Have you run your projections yet? And just kind of your early thoughts on that line and kind of how you project this.
Yeah. So my numbers have Georgia -10 with a total of about 58.5, which is a little under the current total or the last total I saw, I think was in the low 60s. So my numbers are a little bit lower, but my numbers were lower on the Peach Bowl too, and that kind of got blown out of the water. So I don't know how much stock I would put in that over under. But in terms of how I see the championship playing out, I mean, on one hand, I think Georgia's definitively the better team. I think any metric you look at would indicate that. I think your eyeballs would tell you that. The only reservation I have about Georgia in this game, though, is, I mean, they just had to play a knockdown, drag out fight of a game with Ohio State, and that is concerning. I kind of similar to, when Clemson played LSU. Granted, Clemson was not the better team against LSU, but coming off that Ohio State game, I think Clemson kind of ran out of gas in that game against LSU because Clemson, people kind of remember that game as LSU killed Clemson, but Clemson actually jumped out pretty aggressively against LSU and then ran out of gas. So that's the one reservation I would have from the Georgia standpoint, is that how much are they going to have left in the tank? I get that it's a week and a half break instead of just a week, but man, that's to come off of a game like that physically and emotionally. I think that's going to be tough. I get that TCU, also played a very tough game, but if you're TCU, I mean, from the mental side of things, I know physically you're still going to be beat up, but mentally you feel like you're playing with house money here. So I don't think there's any pressure mentally on TCU like there is on Georgia. So I'm kind of on alert for what Georgia's going to look like in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think it's almost ridiculous to indicate that there could be complacency on Georgia's end, but you can't, if you're Georgia, you can't let anything creep into your mind that like, oh, we just won the national championship when we beat Ohio State. Because by any metric, Ohio State's a better team than TCU.
Yep.
I think Vegas would have had it. Was it like -9 or 10 if Ohio State had played TCU? I think I saw.
Yep.
And if Ohio State obviously got the prestige or whatever, that doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. But if you're Georgia, you can't sit there and be like, well, our national championship was won on Saturday night, and now we're just going to show up, and that's all it's going to take. And So I think there's a little bit of that too that has to be avoided. The rat poison, as Nick Saban would call it. So I think that's interesting. The other interesting thing, and I don't know that TCU has now. Quentin Johnston's a heck of a player, but I don't know that they have the full arsenal at receiver that Ohio State has. But it was a little eye-opening, kind of how easy Ohio State was moving the ball against Georgia without really a strong running attack behind them. Can TCU take some things from that, or does Georgia just kind of do what they did to Ohio State when Harrison went out and said, well, look, Quentin Johnston's not going to beat us, so somebody else has to do it. I think that's probably what they'll do. And the question is now, does TCU have the firepower to combat that?
Yeah, especially with I have not seen an update on the status of the TCU running back. His name escapes me at the moment.
Kendre Miller,
Kendre Miller. I haven't seen an update on his status, so as at the time recording here Thursday night, I don't know that I've seen an update on whether he's going to play or not. That makes a difference because he's a very good, very explosive running back. So that definitely will make a difference because if they don't have a reliable running game, and to your point, they don't have the stable of wide receivers that Ohio State has, and Georgia's able to just kind of key in on Quentin Johnston, I don't know how well that's going to fare for TCU.
Yeah, and he is. I double checked. I want to make sure we weren't missing something that happened. As we're getting ready to record here, but it looks like he is still listed as questionable, and so that you could take that one or two ways. That's not good that they haven't just come out and said he's playing, but you could also take that as this is gamesmanship and doesn't matter how good or bad he is right now. He's going to be questionable up until 2 minutes before kickoff, just to kind of keep people guessing. But I agree. That's a good point you brought up. I hadn't really thought about it. I kind of forgot about that he had gotten dinged there in the Michigan game. So that would be tough without him for sure. I don't think we have to really go too deep into what Georgia's path to winning this game is. I think if Georgia shows up and does what Georgia football has done the last couple of years, they're going to be in a great position. Does TCU follow the Ohio State or try to follow the Ohio State blueprint? I mean, I'll be honest, Ohio State followed the exact blueprint I said to follow. I said, don't worry about the run game. Sprinkle it in. Obviously, you don't want to throw it 100% of the time, but don't get caught in this, we have to establish the run and show Georgia we're tough. And no. Air it out. They did. They almost got it done. Not quite. Does TCU follow a similar formula? Is that their path? What is a TCU path to victory?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think the TCU path to victory is Georgia tries to take away Quentin Johnston and he's just too good. Because frankly, I know Marvin Harrison didn't do much in the second quarter of that game, but he still was effective even after the first quarter prior to him getting hurt. So maybe Quentin Johnston is near that level and can just do it anyway, even if they're trying to take him away. I think maybe the other thing is maybe you get, if Kendre Miller does play, you get him involved in kind of the screen game, get him out in space and try to let him hit some home runs. Cause that's the only way that TCU is going to win this game is by hitting home runs, which they were able to do against a really good Michigan defense. So, I'm not ruling it out because I've continued to count TCU out and they continue to prove me wrong. So I'm not gonna count them out here, but it is going to be very tough sledding, I think.
Yeah, I've kind of jokingly said on a few occasions they've made some deal with the devil this year, because even when they lost, it was almost a situation. I'm not saying they weren't trying to win. Obviously, they were trying to win the Big 12 championship, but it was a situation where I think everyone knew they were already in at that point because Utah had already beaten USC. So there wasn't much mystery to me at that point when they kicked off against Kansas State. I think they were already in. But I've kind of joked that, just the way, but I don't see how they do this. Unless Georgia's defense is just not as good as we thought, I tend to think it's still a very good defense. I just think Ohio State is super, super talented on offense. I think there are very, very few teams in the country. I know people like went nuts over Tennessee's offense this year, but I would take Ohio State's personnel over Tennessee's offensive personnel like every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I just think it's more likely that Georgia just ran into probably the best offensive personnel in the country in that game against Ohio State than it is that Georgia's defense just didn't play any good offenses all year and got exposed. I don't think that's what happened. So I agree. I think Georgia's going to win. You want to throw out a score?
Oh, I'll say Georgia 35, TCU 24.
Yeah, I'm at like 38-27 or something like that. 38-24, I think. I could see Georgia covering. Will you do anything on this game, or are the numbers too close, or is there something that could, if the numbers are too close, is there something that could change between now and kickoff if the line swung a point or two in one direction or the other that you would find value?
I mean, my number shows value on TCU, but it's a little concerning to me that like almost 90% of the bets and over 90% of the money are on TCU right now. That's moderately concerning because I mean, there's been, I think the last time I checked, there had been almost 10,000 bets tracked. So for that type of lopsided percentage, I don't live and die by that, but it is something I do look at, and that's a bit concerning to me that like maybe Georgia just shows up and is like, hey, we already slayed the biggest dragon. Let's just show up and smother these guys and get our trophy. So I think there's definitely a scenario out there where Georgia just blows them off the field. So even though my number shows value on TCU, I don't know that I'm going to have anything on it. Maybe I'll get something live. If TCU, like Ohio State did, jumps out early, I might look to get Georgia live. I don't know that I want really any part of TCU from a betting perspective in this game.
Yeah, I don't see anything that really. I would say this: if I had to pick a side, like if I had, you said, okay, Mark, you have to bet on this game in some manner or some fashion, I would lay the points. I would take Georgia at 12.5. But that's not a bet I'm actively like enthusiastic about making. So I think what you said makes a lot of sense. To see how the game starts and see if you can get a live line that's maybe a little more palatable for one side or the other. The other thing I'll say is that's over under is awfully high. And I don't know, maybe this is irresponsible to say this without like the actual data right in front of me, but it sure feels like the over has been a good play in the college football playoffs in recent years.
Yeah.
Like these games are really high scoring. Like even the blowout games like Alabama over Ohio State a couple years ago went well over. That was in the 70s or something, right? I was like,
yeah.
So both games I think went over, both semis went over, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I think that's right. And I can't remember if it was you or someone else asking me this past week whether I had dug into previous playoffs to look at that, at like how different my projection would be from how the playoff games ended up. And that's an exercise I want to do this offseason, because I do think even though the numbers are the numbers from, the regular season, I do think there is something different to, I think coaches coach maybe a little bit differently in the playoffs because they know they have to be more aggressive to win the games. And we saw that with both semifinals this past weekend. So that's something I want to dig into, because I think you're right. I think playoff games tend to go over because the numbers just don't catch up to maybe the coaching and play calling adjustments that coaches make.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. So we both have Georgia over TCU by, call it 2 scores, right?
Yep.
So we'll see. I'm looking forward to it though. Part of me is like, would have been better to get like an Ohio State Michigan rematch or even Georgia Michigan rematch or something. And, I think we're all gonna be sitting here, if on Monday night, if Georgia rolls over TCU, we're like, oh, we saw that coming. But I don't know. I'm still enthusiastic about the game and seeing if TCU can continue to prove me wrong and kind of defy the odds. It would be obviously a great story. I mean, we see these Cinderella runs in March Madness, but there's really, I mean, there's literally like never been a Cinderella run in football, like
No.
ever.
TCU, yeah, TCU winning this would be a real blow to the people that are anti-expansion, I think, because I mean, you're telling me that we couldn't have a TCU caliber team in a 12-team playoff, like do the same thing. So I think, like I said earlier, I think from just a college football fan perspective in general, I think it's great that TCU is in this game, and if they were to win it, I think that would just be great for the sport, and would make the 2024 season even more exciting, knowing that expansion's coming.
Hey, Brian Hartline's with me. He wants the playoff to start. The 12-teamer to start next week.
I saw that
tweet about the playoff. I'm with you. I would love. It's not going to happen, obviously, at this point. They've kind of settled it that it's going to be 2024. But I'm ready. I just think. I think we'll get. I do. I really think we will get more games like we saw on Saturday. I think that first round of the college football playoffs is going to be the most exciting day in sports. I really do. I think it's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I have thoughts, but we'll save that for another podcast.
Yep. Yeah. Let's pump the brakes. We got a long off season. We can talk. We got lots to talk about. But yeah, we'll wrap this up. So let's see what happens Monday night. I'm looking forward to the game. See if TCU can kind of slay Goliath. But I appreciate everyone watching. If you're watching, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@CFB Playbook. And please like the video if you're getting value out of watching us sit here and be bags of wind. But thank you everyone who's continued to support us and watch and listen to us. And we will talk to you next time.